I sat at my parents' dining room table surrounded by 17 relatives while my father explained, for the third time that evening, exactly what was wrong with my life choices. 27 years old, Dad said, shaking his head with profound disappointment. Most people your age are establishing real careers. Your cousin Brian just made partner at his law firm. Your sister Jennifer runs an entire marketing department. And you're still playing around with stock market apps on your phone like it's a video game. I cut into my turkey and said nothing. Richard, don't be too hard on Alex, Mom interjected, though her tone suggested she agreed with every word. Not everyone can be as successful as Jennifer and Brian. Some people are just late bloomers. Late bloomers have potential, Dad countered. Alex is 27 and has nothing to show for it. No real job, no career prospects, living in that tiny apartment, spending all day staring at stock charts. My sister Jennifer, seated at my father's right hand in the position of honor, smiled sympathetically. At 31 she was everything our parents had dreamed of: six-figure salary, corner office, married to a surgeon, currently pregnant with their first grandchild. Have you thought about applying to real companies? She asked, her voice dripping with concern. I could probably get you an interview at my firm. Maybe for an entry-level marketing coordinator position? It wouldn't pay much at first, but it's a foot in the door. I appreciate the offer, I said quietly. The problem is you can't even afford a real financial advisor, Uncle Tom chimed in. He was a dentist who considered himself a financial expert because he'd once attended a wealth management seminar. Trading stocks on your phone with those free apps. That's not investing, Alex. That's gambling. Robinhood, my cousin Brian said with a laugh. He was the golden boy lawyer, 34 and insufferably smug. You're using Robinhood, aren't you? The app for people who can't afford real brokers. Jesus, Alex. I use several platforms, I said mildly. Several gambling apps, Dad corrected. Meanwhile, you're barely scraping by. That apartment you're renting can't be more than 500 square feet. You drive a 15-year-old car. You can't even afford decent clothes. I glanced down at my outfit, jeans and a button-down shirt from Target. Simple, comfortable, practical. I didn't mention that my tiny apartment was actually a two-bedroom condo in Lower Manhattan that I'd purchased outright 3 years ago for $2.3 million. Or that my 15-year-old car was a classic Porsche 911 I'd restored myself, currently valued at around $180,000. It was easier to let them believe what they wanted. The worst part, Mom said, her voice quivering with maternal disappointment, is that we paid for your education at NYU. A good school. And what are you doing with that economics degree? Playing with stocks on your phone. Day trading, Aunt Caroline added with a disapproving sniff. She was a real estate agent who'd read one article about day trading and considered herself an expert. That's what they call it. Day trading. Basically gambling. 95% of day traders lose money. I've heard that statistic, I said. And yet you keep doing it, Jennifer said, shaking her head. Alex, I love you, but you need to face reality. This stock market hobby isn't going to pay your bills. You need a real job with real income. How much do you actually make from this? Brian asked. Be honest. What's your annual income from trading stocks? I took a sip of water. It varies. That means not much, Dad translated. Probably loses more than he makes. Alex, I'm going to be direct with you because I care about you. This needs to stop. You're 27. It's time to grow up, get a real job and start building a real career. Your father is right, Mom added. We're worried about you. You have no savings, no retirement plan, no health insurance. I have health insurance, I interjected quietly. Some cheap catastrophic plan that doesn't cover anything, Mom waved dismissively. Nothing like what Jennifer has with her company benefits. In the living room, the TV was on. Some financial news channel that Uncle Tom had insisted on watching. The sound was muted, but I could see the ticker scrolling across the bottom of the screen. The thing about the stock market, Uncle Tom continued, warming to his lecture, is that it's designed for professionals. People with MBAs, decades of experience, access to insider information. Not some kid with a phone app. Day traders think they're smarter than the market, Brian added. Classic Dunning-Kruger effect. They don't know enough to realize how little they know. Exactly, Dad agreed. Alex, you're not smarter than Wall Street professionals who do this for a living. I never said I was, I replied. Then why do you keep doing it? Jennifer asked, genuinely puzzled. If you know you can't beat the professionals, why waste your time? My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It was probably my executive assistant wondering why I hadn't responded to the email about tomorrow's board meeting. I think he's addicted, Aunt Caroline said. I read an article about gambling addiction. Day trading triggers the same dopamine response as slot machines. That's a good point, Mom said, her eyes widening with fresh concern. Alex, do you think you might have a gambling problem? We could get you help. There are support groups. I don't have a gambling problem, I said. Denial is part of addiction, Uncle Tom said knowingly. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Someone was calling repeatedly. See. Dad pointed at my pocket. Can't even put the phone down during Thanksgiving dinner. Probably checking stock prices. This is exactly what we're talking about. Let me just. I started to reach for my phone. No, Dad said firmly. No phones at the dinner table. That's the rule. Whatever stock tip you're chasing can wait until after we finish eating. It might be important, I said. More important than family? Mom asked, hurt in her voice. I left the phone in my pocket. It stopped buzzing. You know what Alex needs? Brian said. A real mentor. Someone to show him how actual finance works. I have a friend at Goldman Sachs. Maybe he could explain to Alex why retail trading is a waste of time. That would be wonderful, Mom said eagerly. Alex, would you talk to Brian's friend? Get some professional advice. Sure, I said just to end the conversation. See, this is progress, Jennifer said encouragingly. Admitting you need help is the first step. My phone started buzzing again. This time it didn't stop. For God's sake, Dad said. Just turn it off. Dad, I really think. Turn it off, Alex. We're having a family dinner. I pulled out my phone to silence it and saw the caller ID. James Morrison, chairman of Morrison Capital Group and one of my largest investors. He didn't call on Thanksgiving unless something was critically important. I need to take this, I said, standing up. No, you don't, Dad said. Whatever penny stock you're trading can wait. Dad, this is actually... Sit down, Alex. Show some respect for your family. I sat back down and declined the call. Almost immediately a text appeared from James. Call me he. Bloomberg is running your profile as breaking news. My stomach dropped. Everything okay? Jennifer asked, noticing my expression. Fine, I said. In the living room, Uncle Tom suddenly turned up the TV volume. Breaking news from the financial world, a Bloomberg anchor was saying. We're now learning the identity of the mysterious fund manager behind Apex Capital Management, the hedge fund that's generated an astonishing 43% return over the past 3 years. The room went quiet. Uncle Tom was a finance news junkie. Apex Capital manages approximately $4.2 billion in assets, the anchor continued. And in a surprising revelation, the fund's manager and majority owner is just 27 years old, making them the youngest hedge fund manager controlling a portfolio of this size in modern financial history. My family was watching now, attention split between the TV and their plates. We're going live to our financial correspondent Maria Rodriguez, the anchor said. Maria, what can you tell us about this remarkably young fund manager? A new face appeared on screen, a sharp-looking woman standing outside a familiar building. My building. Thanks, David. I'm here outside Apex Capital's headquarters in Manhattan's financial district. The fund's manager, Alex Morgan, has maintained an extremely low profile since founding Apex 4 years ago at the age of 23. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. According to SEC filings just released today, Maria continued, Morgan has grown Apex from an initial $50 million in seed capital to its current $4.2 billion through a combination of quantitative analysis, algorithmic trading, and what insiders call an almost supernatural ability to identify undervalued assets. That can't be right, Dad said quietly, staring at the screen. Morgan graduated from NYU with a degree in economics, Maria went on, and immediately founded Apex using a proprietary trading algorithm they developed during their senior year. The fund has never had a losing quarter and maintains one of the lowest expense ratios in the industry. The screen switched to a photograph. My photograph. The professional headshot my PR team had prepared for exactly this moment, knowing my identity would eventually go public. "Oh my God," Jennifer whispered. "Is that..." Mom couldn't finish the sentence. "Perhaps most remarkably," Maria continued, "Morgan still personally manages the entire portfolio, refusing to delegate trading decisions to junior analysts. Sources close to the fund say Morgan often works 18-hour days and has turned down acquisition offers from larger firms that would have made them an instant billionaire several times over." "This is a mistake," Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. "There's probably another Alex Morgan. It's a common name." The TV showed footage now, me walking into my office building 3 days ago when someone with a camera must have caught me. I was wearing the same Target button-down I was wearing now. "Speculation about Morgan's net worth varies," Maria said, "but analysts estimate that their personal stake in Apex Capital, combined with their own investment returns, puts their current net worth somewhere between $800 million and $1.2 billion. Complete silence in the dining room. "The financial community is buzzing about this revelation," Maria continued. "Many are comparing Morgan to legendary investors like Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch, noting that Morgan achieved this success by age 27, younger than either of those investors were when they started their careers." My phone was buzzing nonstop now. Calls, texts, emails flooding in. "We reached out to Apex Capital for comment," Maria said. "Their head of investor relations provided this statement. Mr. Morgan has always prioritized results over publicity. While he values his privacy, he recognizes that transparency is important for our investors and the broader financial community." The screen showed my office building again, then cut back to the studio anchor. "Remarkable story, Maria. What's next for Alex Morgan and Apex Capital?" "Sources tell us Morgan is considering taking Apex public within the next 2 years, which would make it one of the youngest hedge funds ever to IPO. But for now, Morgan continues to manage the fund personally, maintaining the same intensive hands-on approach that's generated those extraordinary returns." Uncle Tom muted the TV. Everyone was staring at me. "Alex," Mom said faintly. "That was you." "Yes," I said simply. "You manage $4.2 billion? Dad's voice cracked slightly. "As of this morning's market close, it was $4.237 billion. Probably changed during trading today, but yes, approximately that." "And your worth?" Jennifer couldn't seem to finish the sentence. "The estimates are roughly accurate. Closer to the higher end." $1 billion, Brian said. "You're worth $1 billion. "Approximately, yes." The silence was profound. "But you said you used Robinhood," Brian said weakly. "I use multiple trading platforms," I corrected. "Including Robinhood for certain types of trades. It's an efficient platform for retail-sized positions. I also use interactive brokers, Bloomberg terminal and proprietary systems we've developed at Apex." "Apex," Dad repeated. "You own a hedge fund." "I founded it 4 years ago with $50 million in seed capital from Morrison Capital Group. James Morrison gave me a chance when no one else would. 23 years old, no track record, just an algorithm I'd developed and a lot of conviction." "The tiny apartment," Mom said. "You said you lived in a tiny apartment." "I live in a 2-bedroom condo in Tribeca. It's 1,400 square feet. That's tiny by suburban standards but fairly standard for Manhattan. I paid $2.3 million for it 3 years ago. Current market value is around $3.1 million. "The old car," Jennifer said. "Dad said you drive an old car." "A 1974 Porsche 911 that I restored. It's a collector's item. Worth about $180,000, though I'd never sell it. I also have a Tesla Model S for daily driving, but the Porsche is more fun." Uncle Tom found his voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried," I said. 4 years ago when I founded Apex, I tried to explain what I was doing. Dad said I was wasting my time with stock market games. When I tried to explain my returns, you said I was making up numbers. When I showed you my SEC filings, you said they must be fake." Dad's face had gone pale. "I don't remember. Last Thanksgiving," I continued, "I mentioned I'd had a good quarter. You said day traders always think they're doing well until they lose everything. 2 Thanksgivings ago I tried to explain my investment strategy. Uncle Tom interrupted to lecture me about how retail investors can't beat the market. But $4 billion, Aunt Caroline whispered. How could we not know? I kept a low profile intentionally, I said. Publicity makes it harder to execute certain trades. The SEC requires disclosure of positions over certain thresholds, but those filings are technical documents that most people don't read. I've been careful to avoid media attention until now. Until Bloomberg exposed you, Brian said. Until my investors wanted an IPO, I corrected. Going public requires a certain level of transparency. We've been preparing for this reveal for 6 months. The Bloomberg piece was coordinated with my PR team. My phone continued buzzing. I glanced at it. James Morrison, my head of investor relations, my lawyer, 3 journalists requesting interviews, and 2 private equity firms with acquisition offers. I need to make some calls, I said, standing. This is going to be a busy evening. Wait, Dad said. Alex, I don't understand. How did you do this? I looked at him. My father, who'd spent 2 decades building a successful regional accounting firm, who understood money and finance better than most people, who genuinely believed I was wasting my life. I developed a quantitative model during my senior year at NYU, I explained. It identified market inefficiencies in mid-cap tech stocks. I back-tested it for 5 years of historical data and it showed consistent alpha generation. I pitched it to 47 investment firms. 46 rejected me. James Morrison was number 47 and he gave me a chance. Just like that? Jennifer asked. Not quite. He invested $50 million with the stipulation that if I lost more than 15%, he'd pull the capital immediately. My first quarter I returned 19%. Second quarter 23%. By the end of year 1, I generated a 48% annual return. Word spread quietly. High net worth individuals started asking to invest. I took on capital selectively, only from investors who understood my strategy and would commit long term. And now you manage $4 billion, Mom said, still sounding dazed. And now I manage $4.2 billion for approximately 200 investors. Minimum investment is $10 million. We're closed to new capital until after the IPO. Uncle Tom cleared his throat. Alex, I don't suppose. I have about $200,000 in savings. Is there any way? The minimum is $10 million, I repeated. No exceptions. It's an SEC requirement based on our fund structure. Right. Of course. He looked disappointed. Although, I added, after we go public, retail investors will be able to purchase shares. The IPO should happen within 18 to 24 months. I'd like to invest, Brian said quickly. When you go public. I'd definitely like to invest. We'll have a standard IPO process. Anyone can participate. My phone rang again. James Morrison. I needed to take this call. Excuse me, I said, walking out to the backyard. Alex, thank God, James said when I answered. Have you seen the coverage? Just Bloomberg. I'm at Thanksgiving dinner with my family. It's everywhere. CNBC, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. Your photo is trending on Twitter. The narrative is perfect. Young genius disrupts traditional finance. Exactly what we wanted. Good. We're getting interview requests from everyone. 60 Minutes, Bloomberg TV, the Journal's front page. How do you want to handle media? Selectively. I'll do 1 or 2 high-profile pieces. Bloomberg first since they broke the story. Then maybe the Journal. No tabloids, no personality profiles. Keep it focused on the fund's performance and our investment philosophy. Agreed. Alex, this is going to change your life. You understand that. I looked back at the house where my family was visible through the window, all talking animatedly, gesturing, probably trying to process what they'd just learned. I know, I said. Privacy is gone now. People will recognize you. Investors will court you. Competitors will analyze your every move. That's why we prepared for this, James. I know. But preparation is different from reality. How are you holding up? Fine. Mostly amused by my family's reaction. He laughed. I bet. They thought you were a day trader with a Robinhood account. Something like that. Well, they know better now. Look, enjoy your Thanksgiving. We'll regroup tomorrow and map out media strategy. But Alex, congratulations. This is the beginning of a new chapter. Thanks, James. I hung up and stood in the yard for a moment looking at the stars. Somewhere in the back of my mind I'd always known this day would come. You couldn't manage $4 billion in perpetual anonymity. Eventually the truth comes out. I just hadn't expected it to happen at Thanksgiving dinner. When I came back inside, the entire family was waiting in the living room. They'd abandoned dinner. Everyone clustered around the TV where CNBC was now running the story. "There's our little day trader," Jennifer said, and for once there was no condescension in her voice. "Just all." "I owe you an apology," Dad said. He looked shaken. "Alex, I'm so sorry. For everything I said tonight. For everything I've said over the past 4 years. I was wrong." "We were all wrong," Mom added. "We didn't understand what you were doing." "You didn't ask," I said gently. "I tried to explain. Multiple times. But you'd already decided what my life looked like, and you weren't interested in information that contradicted that narrative." "That's fair," Dad acknowledged. "That's completely fair." "Why didn't you push harder?" Jennifer asked. "Why didn't you make us listen?" "Because I didn't need your approval," I said simply. "I knew what I was doing. I had investors who believed in me, mentors who supported me, and results that spoke for themselves. Your opinion didn't change any of that." "But we're your family," Mom said. "Our opinion should matter." "It does matter," I assured her. "It mattered enough that your constant criticism hurt. But not enough to make me doubt myself." Brian was reading something on his phone. "Alex, there's an article here from the Journal. It says you turned down a $2 billion acquisition offer from BlackRock last year." "I turned down 3 acquisition offers actually. BlackRock at $2 billion, Citadel at $1.8 billion, and a private equity consortium at $2.3 billion. "Why?" Uncle Tom asked, genuinely baffled. "That's life-changing money." "I already have life-changing money," I pointed out. "What I have is a fund that I built, a strategy that works, and autonomy to execute my vision without interference. Selling to a larger firm would mean giving up control. I'm not interested in that." "But billions of dollars," Aunt Caroline said weakly. "My current stake in Apex is worth approximately $900 million at the most recent valuation. After the IPO, assuming markets remain favorable, that could grow to $1.5 billion or more. Why would I sell now?" Jennifer was reading her phone now too. "There's a profile of you in Bloomberg. It says you work 18-hour days. That you personally review every trade. That you've never taken a vacation since founding Apex. That's all accurate." "That's not healthy, Alex," Mom said, immediately shifting into mother mode. "You need work-life balance. You need—" "Mom," I interrupted gently, "I appreciate the concern. But I love what I do. I wake up excited to analyze markets. I go to sleep thinking about portfolio optimization. This isn't work to me. It's passion." "But don't you want more?" Jennifer pressed. "A relationship, family, a life outside of finance. Eventually, maybe. Right now I'm building something remarkable. I'm 27. I have time for the rest later." "The article says you still do your own laundry," Brian said, reading from his phone. "That you eat lunch at your desk every day. That you drive yourself to work instead of using a car service. All true. Why would I pay someone to do things I can do myself?" "Because you're a billionaire," Brian said as if it were obvious. "Being wealthy doesn't mean being wasteful. I don't need a car service. I don't need someone to do my laundry. Those things don't add value to my life." Dad was quiet, just watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What is it, Dad?" I asked. "I'm trying to reconcile the Alex I thought I knew with the Alex I'm learning about," he said slowly. "The son I thought was wasting his life was actually building an empire. While I was lecturing you about getting a real job, you were managing billions of dollars. While I was worried about your studio apartment, you owned a multi-million-dollar condo. I'm the same person, Dad. The only thing that changed is your perception." "No," he said. "I think maybe I never really knew you at all." That hurt more than I expected it to. "You could have known me," I said quietly. "If you'd asked. If you'd listened. If you'd believed in me even a little." "I should have," he agreed. "Alex, I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, profoundly sorry. I accept your apology. But things need to change between us." "They will," he promised. "Tell me about your work." Really tell me. I want to understand. So I did. For the next 2 hours, I explained my investment philosophy, my quantitative models, my risk management strategies. I talked about market efficiency, alpha generation, portfolio optimization. I showed them my fund's performance data, explained our fee structure, discussed our plans for the IPO. And for the first time in 4 years, my family actually listened. They asked questions, intelligent questions, curious questions, questions that showed they were genuinely trying to understand. Uncle Tom wanted to know about my algorithmic approach. Jennifer asked about my team structure. Brian inquired about regulatory compliance. Even Aunt Caroline, who'd called me a gambling addict 2 hours earlier, asked thoughtful questions about risk assessment. Around midnight, my phone rang again. My head of investor relations. Alex, sorry to interrupt your holiday, but we have a situation. 3 major financial news networks want you for live interviews tomorrow morning. Bloomberg, CNBC, and Fox Business. Tomorrow's Black Friday. Markets are closed. Exactly. Perfect timing for media without interfering with trading. What do you think? I looked at my family, all watching me expectantly. Tell them I'll do Bloomberg at 9 a.m. and CNBC at 11 a.m. Nothing else until next week. I want the weekend to prepare talking points and coordinate with PR. Done. Also, we've received 42 new investment inquiries in the past 4 hours. All above our $10 million minimum. We're close to new capital, I reminded her. I know, but these are high-profile names. A Saudi prince, 2 tech billionaires, and several family offices. They're willing to wait for the IPO, but they want first access. Create a priority list. We'll review it Monday. Right now, I'm with my family. Of course. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, Alex. I hung up and found everyone staring at me again. Saudi prince. Jennifer asked faintly. Apparently. This is insane, Brian said. 4 hours ago we thought you were a failure. Now you're fielding calls from Saudi princes. I was never a failure, I corrected. You just thought I was. There's a difference. Dad stood up. Alex, can we talk? Just the 2 of us. We stepped out onto the back porch. The night air was cold, but the sky was clear. I've been thinking about what you said, Dad began. About how I never listened. About how I'd already decided what your life looked like. Dad. Let me finish. Please. He took a breath. You're right. I did that. I looked at your lifestyle. The simple clothes, the old car, the small apartment, and I made assumptions. I thought you were struggling. I thought you needed my guidance, my criticism, my push to do better. You were trying to help, I said. I was trying to feel superior, he corrected, echoing what I'd said earlier. You're my youngest child. You were always the quiet one, the one who didn't need attention, who didn't demand the spotlight. Jennifer was the achiever, always bringing home awards and accomplishments. You just did your own thing. And somewhere along the way, I decided that meant you weren't successful. I understand. But here's what I'm realizing now, he continued. While Jennifer was bringing home her college awards, you were developing algorithms. While Brian was celebrating making partner, you were founding a hedge fund. While I was criticizing your lifestyle, you were building something none of us could even comprehend. Dad, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Because you deserve to hear this. Alex, you're extraordinary. Not because you're wealthy, wealth can be luck. But because you had a vision, you believed in yourself when no one else did, and you executed flawlessly for 4 years. That takes intelligence, discipline, and courage that I clearly underestimated. I felt emotion rising in my throat. Thank you. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have been proud of you 4 years ago. Hell, I should have been proud of you regardless of your success. But I'm especially proud of the fact that you stayed true to yourself despite everyone doubting you. It wasn't easy. I'm sure it wasn't. And I made it harder. I'm sorry for that. We stood in silence for a moment. Can we start over? Dad asked. Can I be the father who supports you instead of criticizes you? I'd like that, I said. He pulled me into a hug. The first real hug we'd shared in years. When we came back inside, Mom had pulled out dessert and coffee. The TV was still on, now showing a panel discussion about my fund's performance. They're calling you a prodigy, Jennifer said. The Bloomberg anchor called you the Mozart of quantitative finance. That's excessive, I said. Is it though? Uncle Tom asked. Alex, 43% returns for 3 consecutive years. In an efficient market, that shouldn't be possible. Markets aren't perfectly efficient, I explained. There are small inefficiencies, fractions of a percent, that most managers ignore because the profit margin is too thin. But if you can identify them systematically, execute rapidly, and scale appropriately, those fractions compound into significant alpha. And you figured out how to do that at 23, Brian said, shaking his head in amazement. I had good mentors and a lot of luck. You had brilliance and work ethic, Dad corrected. Don't diminish what you've accomplished. My phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. The Journal wants you for their front page tomorrow. Sunday edition. Largest circulation of the week. Yes or no? I typed back, yes. But I want approval on the final piece before it prints. Done. I looked around at my family, all watching me with new eyes. Respect where there had been condescension. Awe where there had been pity. Pride where there had been disappointment. It felt good. But it also felt bittersweet. Because this recognition came only after public validation. Only after Bloomberg and CNBC and the Wall Street Journal told them I was successful. If I'd failed, would they have ever believed in me? Alex. Mom's voice interrupted my thoughts. Are you okay? Yeah, I said. Just processing. This must be overwhelming, Jennifer said sympathetically. It's been a long time coming. I've known this would eventually happen once we decided to pursue the IPO. When you're on Bloomberg tomorrow, Mom said, wear something nice. Not that Target shirt. I laughed. The first genuine laugh of the evening. I have proper interview clothes, Mom. Don't worry. And maybe mention our family, she suggested. Your supportive family who always believed in you. Mom, I said gently. What? We do believe in you. Now. That's the point, Mom. You believe in me now because Bloomberg told you to. Not because I asked you to. She had the grace to look ashamed. You're right. That's not fair to you. No, it's not. But it's human. Most people need external validation before they can see what's right in front of them. Will you forgive us? She asked. Eventually. I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Going forward, I need you to trust me. Even when you don't understand what I'm doing. Even when my choices don't make sense to you. Can you do that? They all nodded. Good. Because there's something I haven't told you yet. What? Dad asked nervously. After the IPO, I'm planning to donate a significant portion of my wealth to establish a foundation for financial literacy education in underserved communities. How significant? Brian asked. Approximately 40% of my net worth. Around $400 million. Mom gasped. Alex, that's important to me, I finished. I grew up with advantages. Good education, supportive family, access to opportunity. Most people don't have that. I want to change that. $400 million, Uncle Tom said faintly. That's incredibly generous. It's incredibly necessary, I corrected. Financial literacy is the foundation of economic mobility. I want to give people the tools to build their own success. You're going to change thousands of lives, Jennifer said softly. That's the plan. We talked late into the night. About my foundation plans, about the IPO timeline, about my vision for Apex's future. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt like my family was actually seeing me. Not the failure they'd imagined. Not even the billionaire that Bloomberg had revealed. But me. Alex. The person I'd always been. Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood at the NASDAQ podium, about to ring the opening bell for Apex Capital's first day of public trading. My family was in the audience. Mom, Dad, Jennifer, Brian, Uncle Tom, Aunt Caroline, all of them watching with pride. James Morrison stood beside me, grinning. Ready to become very, very public? He asked. Ready as I'll ever be. Any regrets about the anonymity you're losing? I looked out at the trading floor, at the cameras, at my family, at the life I'd built through conviction and hard work. No, I said. No regrets. I rang the bell. The floor erupted in applause. Apex began trading at $47 per share. By end of day, it closed at $63, a 34% gain that made my personal stake worth $1.7 billion. But the number I cared about most wasn't my net worth. It was the text from Dad that came through at 4:01 p.m., right after the closing bell. Watched the whole thing. So proud of you. Not because of the money. Because of who you are. Love you, son. I typed back, love you too, Dad. And finally, after all these years, I knew he meant it. Not because Bloomberg told him to, but because he'd finally learned to listen. The smell of roasted turkey filled Mom's dining room, but the warmth stopped there. I sat at the far end of the table, the spot they always saved for me, furthest from the conversation, closest to the kitchen door. My sister Rachel held court at the other end, her engagement ring catching the light every time she gestured, which was often. So the wedding venue is finally confirmed, Rachel announced, beaming at her fiancé Marcus. The Peninsula. They had a cancellation and we jumped on it. The Peninsula? Aunt Linda gasped. Rachel, that's incredible. How did you manage that? Well, when you're a senior marketing director at a Fortune 500 company, you make connections. Rachel smiled, then her eyes drifted toward me. That smile sharpened. Some of us work hard to build real careers. I took another bite of mashed potatoes. They were good. Mom always made them with real butter and cream cheese. Marcus just made partner at his law firm, Rachel continued, squeezing his hand. 29 and already a partner. Can you believe it? That's our Rachel, Dad said, raising his wine glass. Always been the ambitious one. The one who made something of herself. The implication hung in the air like the steam from the turkey. I was 28. I was not the ambitious one. I had not made something of myself. Jake, pass the rolls, Mom said quietly, her tone apologetic. She always tried to smooth things over, never quite succeeding. I passed the basket to my cousin Derek, who sat beside me in what I'd come to think of as the budget seating section of the table. Derek was in community college. I was a warehouse worker. We were the family's participation trophies, proof that not everyone could be exceptional. So Jake, Uncle Tom leaned forward, his voice that particular combination of curiosity and pity that I'd learned to recognize over the years. Still at that distribution center? What is it, 3 years now? I said. 4 years. Well, steady work is nothing to be ashamed of, he offered, though his tone suggested otherwise. Not everyone can be the CEO type. Rachel laughed, a bright, crystalline sound. Jake's more of a show up, punch the clock, go home kind of guy. Nothing wrong with that. The world needs workers. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Absolutely. Blue-collar jobs are the backbone of America. I mean, someone has to do them. I took a sip of water. They weren't wrong about the warehouse part. I did work at a distribution center. I went there 3 times a week, sometimes 4. Of course, I went there because I owned it, along with 14 others across the West Coast. But they didn't need to know that. Jake's always been the practical one, Mom said, and I could hear the defeat in her voice. She'd given up defending me years ago, settling instead for this lukewarm acknowledgement of my existence. Not everyone needs to be in the spotlight. Remember when he wanted to do that computer thing in college? Dad chuckled, shaking his head. We told him to get a real degree, something practical. Good thing he didn't waste money chasing that pipe dream. I remembered. I'd wanted to study computer science at Stanford. They'd refused to pay, said it was a waste, that I should go to state school and study business like Rachel. So I'd gone to community college for a year, worked nights, taught myself to code. Built my first app in a studio apartment that smelled like cigarette smoke from the neighbors. That app was now the foundation of a logistics optimization platform used by 43 of the Fortune 500 companies. The warehouse job. I'd started working there to understand supply chain pain points from the inside. Then I'd bought the company. Then I'd bought 13 more. Rachel got the brains in the family, Aunt Linda said, smiling at my sister. What's your salary now, honey? You must be doing so well. $180,000 base plus bonuses, Rachel said, trying to sound modest and failing. It's comfortable. It was a good salary. I paid my VP of operations $240,000 and she was worth every penny. My own salary. Well, I paid myself $120,000 a year to keep things simple for taxes. The other $847 million from last year's revenue went back into expansion and the investment portfolio my financial team managed. Jake, you must be making what, 40,000? Uncle Tom asked. That's decent for warehouse work. Something like that, I said. Rachel's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, then did a double take. Her face went pale, then flushed red. What's wrong, honey? Marcus asked. I. She stared at her screen, her mouth opening and closing. There's a Forbes alert. Oh, did they announce something about your company? Mom asked, brightening. Rachel's company getting Forbes coverage was exactly the kind of thing she lived for. No, Rachel said slowly. Her eyes lifted from the phone to me, confusion and something else. Something sharper, flickering across her face. It's not about my company. The table went quiet. Rachel turned her phone around. On the screen was a Forbes notification. Forbes 30 under 30. Tech entrepreneur Jake Morrison revolutionizes global supply chain with $4.2 billion valuation. The silence stretched. I took another bite of turkey. That's not. Mom started then stopped. There must be another Jake Morrison. The picture, Rachel whispered. It's him. She tapped the notification. The article loaded. And there I was, professional headshot taken 2 months ago at the Forbes photoshoot, standing in front of one of my distribution centers. The headline read, From Warehouse Floor to Billionaire, How Jake Morrison Built Chainsync Without Anyone Knowing. Derek leaned over to look at the phone. Holy shit. Language, Aunt Linda said automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. He was staring at me. Everyone was staring at me. Jake. Dad's voice cracked slightly. What is this? I set down my fork carefully. It's a Forbes article. About you. Mom's voice climbed an octave. About you having a company? Worth $4 billion. $4.2 billion, I corrected gently. As of the Series C funding round last month. Though the valuation's probably higher now. The article's about 2 weeks old. They just published today. Rachel's hands were shaking. She scrolled through the article, her face cycling through expressions I'd never seen on her before. You founded Chainsync? 6 years ago. Well, 5.5, technically. Chainsync handles our company's entire supply chain, Marcus said, his lawyer brain apparently still functioning. We pay them. We pay you hundreds of thousands a year in fees. $1.3 million annually, I said. You got a good rate because you signed on early. Prices have gone up since then. Uncle Tom made a choking sound. You're a billionaire? On paper. Most of it's tied up in the company and investments. But yes, my net worth is somewhere around $2.8 billion, depending on stock prices and market fluctuations. The silence that followed was profound. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the distant sound of neighbors' music, the tick of the grandmother clock in the hallway. Rachel found her voice first. But you work at a warehouse. I own 15 warehouses, I said. I work at them sometimes because I like to stay connected to ground-level operations. That's actually what the Forbes article is about. How I built the company from the inside out, understanding every aspect of the supply chain before I tried to optimize it. $4.2 billion, Dad repeated, looking dazed. That's not possible. You're 28. 28 is the average age for tech founders to hit unicorn status, I said. I'm actually a bit behind schedule compared to some of my peers. Mom's hand went to her chest. Jake, why didn't you tell us? I looked at her for a long moment. When would I have told you, Mom? Between Dad telling me I was wasting my life on computers, or Rachel explaining how I'm not SEO material. That's not fair, Rachel said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I kept my tone level, conversational. Last Christmas you introduced me to your work friends as my brother, the warehouse guy, in that tone people use when they're explaining something embarrassing. At Easter, Dad told his golf buddies I'd never had much ambition. At your engagement party, you literally seated me at the kids' table because you said I wouldn't fit in with the professionals. Marcus was scrolling on his own phone now. There are 30 articles here. Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Bloomberg. Jake, you were on CNBC last month. The Squawk Box interview, I nodded. That was a good conversation. Jim Cramer wanted to talk about expansion into Asian markets. Jim Cramer, Aunt Linda repeated faintly. You talked to Jim Cramer. Several times. He's actually pretty funny off camera. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Then continuously. She looked down at it and I watched the blood drain from her face completely. What now? Marcus asked. Everyone's sharing the article, she whispered. Everyone from work. My boss just texted asking if I'm related to the Jake Morrison from Forbes. She looked up at me, something like panic in her eyes. My boss. My VP. The CEO of my company just sent a company-wide email congratulating me on having a tech visionary in the family. That's nice of them, I said. Nice. Her voice pitched up. Jake, I spent 2 hours in our last meeting explaining how we needed to optimize our supply chain costs. I suggested we evaluate ChainSync alternatives because the fees were too high. My boss loved the idea. Now he knows ChainSync is owned by my brother, the one I've been calling the warehouse worker for 4 years. The weight of that settled over the table like snow. Oh my God, Mom said suddenly. The company Christmas party. I told Margaret Chin that you couldn't make it because you were working a night shift. Margaret Chin, whose husband sits on the board of Chin Investments. Chin Investments handles about $200 million of my portfolio, I confirmed. Mr. Chin and I have lunch quarterly. He's never mentioned meeting you though. Professional courtesy, I suppose. Dad's face had gone from pale to red. The warehouse. You said you worked at the Pacific Distribution Center. I do work there. I own it. I own Pacific Distribution Centers 1 through 15. Number 16 opens in Seattle next month. I told the guys at the club you were doing warehouse inventory, he said, his voice rising. I said my son counts boxes for a living. Steve Patterson was there. Steve Patterson, whose company uses your service. Patterson Logistics is one of our major clients, I agreed. Mr. Patterson and I are actually pretty friendly. We played golf at Pebble Beach last year during the Supply Chain Summit. Uncle Tom stood up abruptly, his chair scraping back. I need some air. No one stopped him. No one moved at all. Rachel was still scrolling, her face a mask of horror. There's a video. From the Forbes shoot. She clicked it. My voice filled the dining room through her phone's speakers. People ask why I didn't tell my family about ChainSync. Video me said, leaning against a forklift in one of my warehouses. The truth is I tried it first. But every time I mentioned the company I got the same response. That's nice, honey. Or, when are you going to get a real job? Eventually I stopped trying to explain. I figured the work would speak for itself eventually. The interviewer's voice. And now you're one of Forbes 30 under 30, with a company valuation that puts you among the youngest billionaires in tech. What do you want to say to your family now? Video me smiled, that professional smile I'd perfected for press interviews. I'd say I finally got a real job. This one just came with a few more responsibilities than they expected. Rachel stopped the video. She set her phone down carefully like it might explode. You told Forbes about us, she said quietly. About how we treated you. They asked about my inspiration, I said. I told them the truth. Every time someone told me I'd never amount to anything, every time I was introduced as the family disappointment, it reminded me why I was building something. Why I was working 20-hour days in that studio apartment. Why I turned down acquisition offers that would have made me a multimillionaire at 25 because I knew the company could be worth more. 25. Mom's voice cracked. You've been a multimillionaire since you were 25? I've been a millionaire since I was 23 when the series of funding came through. But yes, by 25 I had acquisition offers in the $50 to $100 million range. I turned them down because I believed ChainSync could be worth $1 billion within 5 years. You were right, Marcus said, his lawyer brain apparently cataloging all this information. I was conservative. We hit unicorn status, $1 billion valuation, in 3.5 years. The $4.2 billion valuation came 6 months ago. Current projections have us at $8 billion within 18 months, assuming our AI optimization rollout performs as expected. Derek, still sitting next to me, let out a low whistle. Dude. That's insane. It's a lot of work, I said. But yes, it's been successful. Dad's phone started ringing. He looked at it, then stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. Through the doorway I could hear his muffled voice. Steve, I can explain. No, I had no idea. Is that Jake Morrison? Yes, I know what I said at the club. Mom was crying silently, tears running down her face. Jake, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I said gently. I told you I was working on something. You told me to be realistic. I told you I had meetings in the city. You asked if they were job interviews for better positions. I told you I was traveling for work. You said warehouse work doesn't require travel and I must be lying. We thought, she started then stopped because there was no good way to finish that sentence. Aunt Linda had her phone out now too. It's everywhere. CNN just posted about it. Tech prodigy hid billion-dollar success from family for years. The Forbes team was very thorough, I said. They interviewed about 50 people, investors, clients, employees, industry analysts. They wanted to understand how I built the company so quietly. Turns out it made for a compelling narrative. Rachel's phone rang. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. It's my boss. You should answer it, I said. It's rude to leave your boss hanging. She stood up on shaky legs and walked toward the kitchen. Her voice drifted back. Hello, Mr. Patterson. Yes, that's my brother. It's the same one. I didn't know. No, he never mentioned. Marcus was reading something on his phone. There's a whole section here about your warehouses. It says you started working at Pacific Distribution Center as a minimum wage employee to learn the business from the ground up. You worked there for 18 months before making an acquisition offer. 20 months, I corrected. I wanted to understand every role. Loading, unloading, inventory management, customer service. The owner was planning to retire and I made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He stayed on as a consultant for 2 years, taught me everything about the business side. How did you afford to buy a warehouse at 24? My first app, the one I built in community college, sold to a mid-size logistics company for $8 million. I kept $2 million for living expenses and invested $6 million into building ChainSync's initial platform. The warehouse purchase came later, after series of funding. $8 million, Mom repeated numbly. When you were 19? 20. It was right after my birthday. And you never told us. It wasn't a question. I tried to tell you. You told me I was being scammed, that no one pays millions for apps, that I needed to focus on getting a steady job with benefits. The silence that followed was broken by Dad returning to the dining room. His face was ashen. Steve Patterson just informed me that you're not only his logistics provider, but you saved his company from bankruptcy 3 years ago by restructuring their entire supply chain. It was a good turnaround project, I said. Patterson Logistics is much more efficient now. He wants to meet you. Properly. He invited us to his house for dinner next week. Dad sat down heavily. Jake, I've been telling everyone at the club that my daughter is the successful one. That Rachel is the one who made it big while you were working in a warehouse, I finished. Which was true. Just not the whole truth. Rachel returned from the kitchen. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. My boss wants me to arrange a meeting with you. He wants to discuss expanding our contract with ChainSync and possibly investing in your Series D funding round. We're not doing a Series D, I said. We're cash flow positive and don't need external funding anymore. But I'm always happy to discuss contract expansions. Have him email my assistant. The contact information is in the Forbes article. Your assistant, she repeated. You have an assistant. I have 3. One for scheduling, one for communications, and one who handles the technical aspects of my travel and equipment needs. Plus about 400 other employees across all the facilities and the headquarters. Marcus was still reading. It says here you live in a $3.2 million loft in the city. $2.8 million. Forbes inflated the number slightly. Though property values have gone up, so they might be right now. We thought you lived in an apartment in the warehouse district, Mom said faintly. I do live in the warehouse district. That's where my loft is. I bought and renovated an old industrial building. It's convenient. I can walk to the main distribution center in 15 minutes. Why? Rachel's voice broke on the word. Why did you let us think you were poor? That you were barely making it? I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't let you think anything. You decided what you wanted to believe and I stopped correcting you. Every time I tried to share what I was building, I got condescension or dismissal. So I stopped sharing. But billions of dollars. It's not about the money, I said. It was never about the money. It was about building something that mattered. Something that actually solved problems. Do you know how much waste there is in global supply chains? How many inefficiencies? I built something that fixes that. The money is just a side effect of doing it well. Uncle Tom returned from outside looking shell-shocked. My neighbor just called. He saw the Forbes article. Wanted to know if I was related to Jake Morrison. He looked at me. I told him no. I told him I didn't know any billionaires. You can tell him yes next time, I said. I don't mind. Aunt Linda had tears in her eyes. Jake, the things we said. The way we treated you. You treated me like you saw me, I said simply. I understand. Success is hard to imagine when you can't see the work behind it. You saw a warehouse worker. You didn't see the platform I was building, the code I was writing, the meetings I was taking, the company I was growing. Dad's phone rang again. He looked at it and groaned. It's Bob from the club. You might want to answer it, I said. Bob Carter runs Carter Industries, and they're considering switching to ChainSync from their current provider. He might want an introduction. Dad stared at me. You knew Bob Carter was. Dad, I know everyone at your club. Half of them are clients. The other half are potential clients. Why do you think I never accepted your invitations to join you there? It would have been awkward explaining why the CEOs kept pulling me aside for business discussions. He answered the phone with shaking hands. Hello, Bob. Yes, that's my son. I'll see what I can do. Rachel sat back down at the table. Her engagement ring no longer seemed to catch the light quite the same way. The article says you're speaking at the Global Supply Chain Summit in Singapore next month. Keynote address. It's a good opportunity to announce some new features we're rolling out. I was going to go to that summit, she said quietly. As part of my company's delegation. I know. Your company signed up 3 months ago. They're one of the sponsors. You knew I'd be there? I knew your company would be represented. I assumed you might be part of the team. Were you going to tell me then? When you saw me there? I considered the question. Probably not. I would have given my keynote, taken some meetings and flown home. Whether you made the connection or not would have been up to you. That's cold, Marcus said, but there was no heat in it. Just observation. Is it? I asked. 4 years I've been the family embarrassment. The one who didn't make it. The one who wasn't worth including in the important conversations. I built a company anyway. I succeeded anyway. I didn't do it for your approval, I did it because I loved the work. The Forbes article coming out today wasn't my choice. They decide publication dates. But I'm not going to apologize for what I built. Mom was crying harder now. Jake, we love you. You know that. I know you love the idea of me, I said gently. I'm not sure you've ever loved the actual me. The me who wanted to study computers instead of business. The me who saw potential in supply chain logistics. The me who was happy working in a warehouse because I was learning something valuable. That's not fair, Rachel said again, but even she didn't sound convinced. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's true. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. I need to take this. It's my lead investor. You have an investor calling you on Thanksgiving? Dad asked. Investors don't really observe holidays when there's money involved. I stood up. Excuse me. I walked outside to the back patio, answering as I went. Harrison, happy Thanksgiving. Yes, I saw the Forbes piece went live. No, I'm not concerned about the family angle. It's honest. The response has been strong. Good. Set up the meetings for Monday. I'll be back in the city by then. Through the window I could see my family sitting around the table, all of them on their phones now, probably reading every article about me they could find. Learning about my life from journalists and industry analysts instead of from me. Yes, the Singapore keynote is still on schedule, I continued. I've already finished the presentation. Potential acquisitions? I'll review the prospectus, but we're not in a hurry. Talchin, I'll meet him for lunch on Tuesday. Yes, same place. When I hung up and returned inside, the atmosphere had shifted again. They'd moved past shock into something else. Calculation maybe. Or recalibration. Jake, Dad said, his voice careful now, measured. We should talk. Really talk. About everything. We are talking, I said, sitting back down. We're having Thanksgiving dinner. You know what I mean. About your company. About your success. About. He gestured vaguely. Everything we didn't understand. What's there to understand? I built a company. It became successful. That's the whole story. Rachel leaned forward. The Forbes article mentions you're looking at expansion into European markets. Is that true? Yes. We're opening 3 facilities in Germany next year, with plans for 5 more across the UK and France. My company has European operations, she said, and I could hear the wheels turning in her head. We've been struggling with supply chain coordination across borders. Most companies do. That's why we're expanding there. Could I set up a meeting? Between you and our European division heads. I looked at her carefully. You want to arrange a business meeting with me? Yes. This could be huge for my company. For my career. Ah. I nodded slowly. Now I'm worth knowing. Now I'm worth introducing to your colleagues. When there's something in it for you. She flinched. That's not. Isn't it? Kept my voice level. For hours ago you mocked me for working in a warehouse. Now you want to use my success to advance your career. That's exactly what it is, Rachel. And that's fine. That's business. But let's call it what it is. Jake, that's not fair, Mom protested. Mom, I love you. I love all of you. But fairness isn't really the issue here. I stood up again. I'm going to head out. You're leaving. Dad's did too. But we haven't had dessert. And we need to talk more about this. There's not much to talk about. You all have my number. You've had it the whole time. If you want to reach out, actually reach out. But I'm not going to sit here while you all calculate how to benefit from my success. That's not what we're doing, Aunt Linda said, but her voice was weak. Aunt Linda, you've been texting someone for the past 10 minutes. I'm guessing it's someone who wants an introduction to me. Uncle Tom left earlier to call his neighbor back. Marcus has been researching how to invest in ChainSync. Dad's gotten 3 phone calls from his club. And Rachel has already asked for a business meeting. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. I understand. I really do. But I'm not interested in transactional relationships with my family. Jake, please. Mom stood reaching for my hand. Don't go. Not like this. I squeezed her hand gently. I'm not angry, Mom. I'm really not. But I need you all to understand something. The Forbes article changes nothing about who I am. I'm the same person I was this morning. I built the same company. I did the same work. The only thing that changed is that now you know about it. We want to be part of your life, she said, tears streaming down her face. Then be part of my life. Not part of my success. Not part of my business. Part of my actual life. The one where I still work in warehouses sometimes because I like understanding how the products move. The one where I drive a 6-year-old Toyota because it's reliable and I don't care about status symbols. The one where I'm still the same person you thought wasn't worth including in the important conversations. I walked toward the door. Rachel called after me. Jake, wait. I'm sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry for how I treated you. I turned back. She was standing now, and for the first time all day, she looked genuinely distressed rather than calculating. I believe you, I said. And I accept your apology. But Rachel, I need you to understand something. Success didn't change me. Money didn't change me. I'm the same person I was when I was living in that studio apartment eating ramen and writing code at 3 a.m. The same person I was when I worked minimum wage at the warehouse. The same person I've always been. You just couldn't see it because you were looking at what I had instead of who I was. I see it now, she whispered. Do you? Or do you see $4.2 billion? She didn't answer. I walked out the front door and got into my car. That 6-year-old Toyota still running perfectly well. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Messages from employees, investors, other family members who'd seen the Forbes piece. A text from my VP of operations. The article looks great. Ready for the Monday morning press marathon. I texted back. Ready. See you at 6. Because that was the thing they'd never understood. The money was nice. The success was gratifying. But what I actually loved was the work. The problem solving. The optimization. The elegant code that made complex systems run smoothly. The satisfaction of seeing a warehouse operate at peak efficiency because I'd designed the flow correctly. Forbes had captured that, actually. The article was about more than my net worth. It was about the philosophy of building something from the inside out. About understanding the problem before you try to solve it. About the value of doing the unglamorous work that nobody sees. My family had read the headline and seen the valuation. They'd missed the actual story. Maybe someday they'd go back and read it for real. Read the part about the 20-hour days. The failed prototypes. The clients who took a chance on an unknown startup. The employees who believed in the vision. The slow, grinding work of building something that mattered. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd stay focused on the number, $4.2 billion, and miss everything else. Either way, I had work to do. Singapore wasn't going to prepare itself for, and the German expansion needed my attention. The Series C investors wanted quarterly reports. 3 major clients were waiting for contract renewals. The AI optimization rollout required my final approval. I pulled out of my parents' driveway and headed back to the city. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Morrison? This is Patricia Chin from Forbes. I'm following up on the article response. Do you have time for a few quick questions? Sure, I said, merging onto the highway. The article has received extraordinary engagement. Over 2 million views in the first 4 hours. Your story about hiding your success from your family really resonated with readers. Can you tell me, do you have any regrets about keeping it secret for so long? I thought about it. About the Thanksgivings where I sat at the far end of the table. About the family gatherings where I was introduced as the warehouse worker. About the subtle and not so subtle dismissals that had accumulated over the years. No regrets, I said. It taught me something important. That external validation doesn't matter. What matters is doing work you believe in, building something that has value, and staying true to your vision even when no one else can see it. My family couldn't see what I was building. But I could. And that was enough. That's a great quote. Can I use it? Sure. One more question. Now that your family knows, what happens next? I watched the city lights appear on the horizon, the skyline I'd come to know so well over the past 6 years. Somewhere in that cluster of buildings was my loft, my office, my warehouses, my life's work. Now, I said, I get back to work. The same work I've been doing all along. Nothing changes. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Enjoy your holiday. I hung up and smiled. Guess it was true. Nothing had changed. I was still the same person. Still building the same company. Still solving the same problems. The only difference was that now, when my sister introduced me to her colleagues, she'd have to think of a new way to describe me. I was fine with that. In fact, I was better than fine. I was exactly where I wanted to be.
I have a lazy sister who, believe it or not, made me jeopardize my career by putting my neck on the line to secure her a job. Loyalty to family can sometimes be the greatest burden, and I speak from personal experience. Let me introduce you to my sister, Stella, who is a year younger than me. We are the products of our mother's love life, which never led to marriage. The closest thing we had to a father figure was Uncle Greg, our mother's brother, who had been looking after us for as long as I can remember. It's incredible how, from the way we carried ourselves, you'd never guess we were being supported by someone who had his own family. I graduated from college before Stella and was desperately searching for a job. Knowing Uncle Greg's influence, I approached him for help. After expressing my gratitude for everything he'd done for us, I opened up about my job search. We discussed it for a while, during which I could sense that he was assessing whether my college education had been a waste or not. Fortunately, he seemed satisfied with my qualifications and promised to help me secure a job. Uncle Greg was a man of his word, so I was overjoyed. 3 days later, he called and asked me to bring all my documents to a company. To my amazement, he had secured me a position as the head of human resources. This was beyond my expectations. I had 0 experience and was fresh out of college. Nonetheless, I was determined to prove myself, not wanting to let my uncle down. A year later, Stella also graduated from college and embarked on her job hunt, which proved unsuccessful. I suggested that she visit Uncle Greg for assistance, and I planned to accompany her. However, my concern was that Uncle Greg, who had high standards, would be disappointed upon meeting my sister, a law graduate. I, too, was disappointed, but I knew I had to let Uncle Greg assess Stella for himself. We arrived at Uncle Greg's place, and he engaged my sister in a conversation. I remained mostly silent, and even I could tell that she appeared unrefined. Uncle Greg didn't say anything about my sister, but the disappointment in his eyes was evident. After some time, he promised to help her in her job search. 2 weeks passed, and Stella hadn't received a favorable response from Uncle Greg. She reached out to him, but he would merely say he was working on it. One evening, our mother and sister approached me for a discussion after I returned from work. Exhausted, I asked to have the conversation the following morning before I headed to work. They both woke me up early the next day, and Stella started by expressing her frustration with Uncle Greg, who she believed was taking too long to find her a job. I defended him, emphasizing how good he'd been to us and that she needed to be patient. Stella, however, insinuated that Uncle Greg was now playing favorites between us, citing how quickly he had found me a job, while she had waited for weeks. Our mother chimed in, suggesting a solution for Stella's joblessness. I was initially happy for my sister until I heard the proposed solution. Our mother suggested that I use my influence as the head of human resources in my company to hire Stella as a sales agent with a high salary. I was shocked and turned to Stella to see if it was a joke. Our mother further argued that it was only natural for someone in my position to do so. She claimed that since I was the head of my department, nobody would question the hire. I hesitated to say no immediately and asked Stella if she had any experience as a sales agent. She retorted by asking if it was necessary, given her law degree. It was frustrating to see her demand a job for which she lacked the qualifications and experience. To make matters worse, both she and our mother were insisting on a high salary for her. I made it clear to my family that what they were asking for was simply not feasible. I explained to my mom that Stella's law degree had no connection to my line of work. She raised her voice, insisting that I should look at the bigger picture, which, according to her, was the substantial salary Stella would earn once I secured the job for her. I pointed out that fulfilling their request could jeopardize my career, as it might appear as favoritism if my superiors found out I'd employed someone unfit for the job. My mother and sister, however, dismissed my explanation, accusing me of not prioritizing family success. This was when I truly understood the bondage that family loyalty could become. How could they insinuate that I didn't want our family to succeed just because I declined to risk my career for their sake? It felt like pure selfishness. I reiterated my earlier stance and prepared some food. The rest of the day passed in silence, but the discussion continued to weigh on my mind. There was no way I could accede to their demands. I hadn't even been on the job for 2 years, and it wasn't time to act like I owned the place. My mom and sister started giving me the cold shoulder, essentially trying to guilt-trip me. I felt miserable in my own home, so I began intentionally coming home late to spend less time there. However, that tactic didn't improve the situation. I finally decided to seek advice from someone I knew would offer an unbiased perspective, Uncle Greg. One day, I stopped by Uncle Greg's place on my way home from work and shared everything that had been happening at home, except for the part where Stella accused him of playing favorites. Uncle Greg listened and assured me that getting a job for my sister was not a difficult task for him. He mentioned that he'd been stalling the process because he had doubts about her capabilities for the job, even in her field. He pointed out certain observations he'd made during their discussions, which I agreed with. Uncle Greg explained that if he recommended my sister for a job, it would put his own reputation at risk with his friends who were her potential employers. He made it clear that she didn't meet their expectations and could damage his standing. He also revealed that the talk of not wanting family success was an emotional ploy to manipulate and guilt-trip me into doing their bidding. He urged me not to sacrifice my budding career for my selfish sibling and suggested that I consider moving out of the house and renting my own apartment if the pressure became too much. Uncle Greg's words deeply resonated with me, and he was right. I needed to let my mother and sister understand that I was an independent person who couldn't be swayed in any direction they wished. But despite this realization, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I decided to make a one-time compromise for Stella's sake. One morning, I approached Stella and asked her to come to the office later that day to pick up her appointment letter. The relief in her demeanor was palpable, and my mother smiled, assuring me that I was making the right decision, even though I knew she was wrong. I was unknowingly setting myself up for a major disaster. Stella came to the office, received her appointment letter, and commenced work. However, the real issue was her lack of productivity, which was evident. The problem was that her role was not in her field of expertise. 2 months later, most of the staff began complaining about Stella's performance. I had to address the issue with my sister before it escalated further. I pointed out that she was not contributing to the company, yet she was overpaid compared to some hardworking, productive colleagues. I explained that, under normal circumstances, firing her would be the best option for the company, but I was using my influence to delay such a decision. Stella defended herself, claiming she was still new to the job and needed time to learn the ropes. While her reasoning was understandable, the real problem was her lack of effort and enthusiasm. She seemed to be lethargic, simply waiting for payday. Just as I was about to dismiss her, she dropped the bombshell. Stella said she was considering taking a 1-month paid leave to attend to her health, despite no apparent health issues. I knew this was just an excuse. Here was someone on the verge of facing multiple complaints, and all she seemed interested in was stirring up trouble. I sternly warned Stella against entertaining the idea of a leave and threatened to fire her if she attempted it. I didn't let the matter rest. When I got home, I brought it to our mother's attention. I reminded her of her assurance to help Stella secure a job. And now, barely 2 months into her employment, Stella was requesting 2 months of paid leave. I made it clear to our mother that if Stella's productivity didn't improve by the end of the month, I would ensure she got fired. Our mother downplayed the situation, suggesting that Stella would get the hang of it in due time. She asked me to be patient with my sister. I agreed to give Stella the month to improve her productivity, and my course of action would be determined by her performance. I patiently waited for my sister to step up and be more productive, but it was a regrettable situation for both of us. Unfortunately, my superior got wind of the ongoing complaints and summoned Stella and me. During the review, it was revealed that Stella hadn't been productive since she started as a sales agent, and I had failed to take the necessary action, which would have been reporting the issue to management. My favoritism was exposed, and we were both immediately terminated. I began pleading for my job on the spot, but I was informed that the decision was final. Stella, on the other hand, rather than showing humility, stated that the job was beneath her, considering her educational qualifications, and walked out of the office while I remained on my knees begging to retain my job. I regretted not heeding Uncle Greg's warnings. His predictions had become a reality, and I had allowed my sister to ruin my career. I returned home, a mixture of tears and anger in my heart, only to find Stella casually sitting on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, watching a movie, seemingly undisturbed by the whole ordeal. I immediately confronted Stella, and we started exchanging heated words. Our mother rushed to the scene, trying to calm the situation. At this point, Stella hadn't shared what had happened, and my anger was directed towards our mother. I began shouting at her, holding her responsible for emotionally blackmailing me into bringing Stella to my workplace. When she learned what had transpired, our mother raised her voice in return and demanded that I never speak to her in such a manner. I regretted that I had been disrespectful, but was unable to control my emotions at that moment. Feeling overwhelmed and wanting to avoid doing something regrettable, I ran out of the house. I didn't know where I was headed, but I knew I needed to be far away from them before my anger got the best of me. I stayed in a hotel for 3 days, crying and not hearing from my mother or sister. After a while, I decided to visit Uncle Greg. He was surprised to see me, especially on a weekday when I should have been at work. He asked about the issue, and I couldn't hold back my tears. It took some time for him to console me, and then I began telling him how I regretted not heeding his earlier warnings. What I didn't mention was that I'd been avoiding his house and calls ever since I helped Stella get the job, because I knew it would disappoint him, and I was right. Uncle Greg was initially upset with me for not listening, but his anger quickly turned to empathy as he understood the pressure of family expectations. He didn't want to discuss the matter further. He simply asked me to get into his car, and we drove back to our house. When Uncle Greg arrived at the house, he was furious. It was the first time either Stella or I had seen him like this. My mother, however, had grown up with her brother and wasn't surprised by his anger. She refused to take responsibility for my job loss and defended herself by stating that all she did was ask me to help my sister secure a job. She and Stella turned the tables on me, claiming that I hadn't guided Stella properly at work. Uncle Greg saw through their attempt to avoid blame and gave them a stern look before assuring me that everything would be okay. He promised to do everything in his power to help me find a new job. I thanked my uncle, who wasted no time in leaving the house. My mother, upon seeing her brother's departure, turned to me and called me a disgrace. She questioned why I had made such a big deal out of the situation and involved someone who had little or no business with it. I couldn't respond the way my emotions wanted me to, so I simply went into my room and closed the door. It has been 2 weeks since the incident, and both my sister and I are jobless. I am not sitting idly, waiting for my uncle to work his magic. I am actively searching for job opportunities and hope for a positive outcome soon. In an update, I can say it has been extremely challenging staying at home with my sister and mother. They have both united against me, making me feel like an outsider in my own family. I returned last week from yet another unsuccessful job hunt, feeling frustrated and exhausted. It appeared that even my uncle was struggling to secure a job for me, and I couldn't blame him. If I had been wiser, I wouldn't find myself in this current disaster. After submitting my qualifications to a firm that promised to get back to me, I decided to rest on the couch for a moment. My short nap was abruptly interrupted about 5 minutes later when my sister started screaming in excitement. She deliberately came to the living room, dramatizing her joy, as if she was deliberately looking for trouble, as she often did. Our mother hurried to her, and she informed her, loud enough for me to hear, that she had been invited for an interview at a law firm. Our mother was thrilled for her, but I tried to mind my own business. However, my sister couldn't resist taking a jab at me, insinuating that she was achieving for herself what sisters and uncles, who claimed to be family, could not do for her. It was a clear reference to me and Uncle Greg. I couldn't allow her to add to my frustration, so I gave a sarcastic laugh, mentioning that people celebrated interview invitations as if they had already landed the job. Not stopping there, I added a cutting remark about interviewers discovering they'd wasted their time with an empty-headed candidate. My sister was visibly affected, and she wanted to confront me, but our mother stepped in, clearly favoring her. This didn't surprise me. I hadn't expected anything different. Stella went for the interview and returned with a smile, informing our mother, right in front of me, that she was preferred over the other candidates and was offered the job on the spot. The pay wasn't as much as she had earned in my firm, but she was assured it would triple in 3 months. My sister and mother took delight in rubbing it in my face, making me wonder about the judgment of the employers who hired her. I also wondered about the quality of the other candidates if Stella was chosen over them. Nevertheless, I decided to wait and see how it would play out because I knew my sister's track record with jobs. In the second update, I had a serious altercation with my mother this morning, all because of my sister Stella. Since she got her job, my mother decided that no one else in the house, except me, should perform any chores, no matter how minor. I had tolerated it until this morning when my mother approached me and demanded that I do Stella's laundry. The demand was insulting, and I refused outright. I told my mother that I wouldn't touch my sister's clothing even if there was a gun to my head. My mother argued that Stella needed to focus on her new job, something she claimed I lacked. According to her, we should support her in any way we could. I asked my mother if Stella had ever done my laundry when I had my job. I finally told her that if Stella was too busy to do her laundry, she could do it herself or take it to one of the numerous dry cleaning services in the city. I retreated to my room, closing the door, feeling utterly humiliated. How could my mother demand that I do Stella's laundry? I decided to reach out to Uncle Greg and inform him about the humiliation I was enduring at the hands of my mother and sister. I was hoping for some good news, but amidst the torrent of insults I faced daily, my uncle revealed he was still trying to pull a few strings, though it might take time. He expressed his displeasure with the way my family was treating me and assured me he would talk some sense into my younger sister. One evening, as I was in my room, Stella returned from work and started arguing loudly over the phone. From her words, I gathered she was speaking to Uncle Greg. She rebuked him for meddling in our affairs and demanded he stay away from us. When my mother asked her about the call, Stella referred to Uncle Greg as that man who doesn't know his place. My mother seemed to approve of Stella's stance, believing I was foolish for involving an outsider in our family matters. In the third update, I made the decision to move in with Uncle Greg and his family after Stella's outburst. It became evident to him that I was enduring a lot at home. I informed my mother about my decision, but she dismissed it, claiming I had been trying to distance myself from her and Stella anyway. The only time I saw or heard from Stella was a month later when she showed up at Uncle Greg's place to invite both of us to an award event organized by her firm. According to Stella, the event aimed to recognize the efforts of key individuals, and she was one of the honorees. She wanted Uncle Greg and me to attend, perhaps to showcase her productivity. I confronted her, telling her she should be apologizing to Uncle Greg instead of inviting him to the party. Stella, undeterred, made condescending remarks, claiming she was offering him an opportunity to witness her glory. I refused to attend the event, expressing my disgust at the entire situation. Uncle Greg tried to convince me otherwise, but I couldn't comprehend why he wanted us to attend a party that seemed nothing more than a charade. In the final update, everything fell into place. I finally understood why Uncle Greg insisted we attend Stella's party. In the end, despite the difficult situation, Uncle Greg insisted that I present myself at my best for Stella's party. Reluctantly, I attended the event alongside my mother. As the ceremony unfolded, individuals were recognized for their contributions. When it was Stella's turn, she confidently stepped onto the podium, radiating confidence. Unexpectedly, she cut off her boss's statement and began speaking passionately. Her words were pointed directly at me, emphasizing her triumph over the hurdles she claimed I couldn't overcome. She labeled me a failure lacking the drive to succeed. Stella praised our mother, who basked in the attention. However, to my astonishment, Stella's boss invited Uncle Greg to the stage. Surprised, Stella watched as Uncle Greg debunked her claims. He revealed the truth about how I lost my job due to Stella's actions and our mother's selfishness. Uncle Greg disclosed that he orchestrated this scheme to expose Stella's lack of productivity. Stella was publicly fired on stage, drowning in shame. My mother hurriedly left, unable to bear the humiliation. Uncle Greg introduced me to influential people that day, assuring me that a job opportunity would emerge soon. I severed ties with my mother and sister, knowing they would likely come crawling back for assistance eventually. Looking back, I am grateful for Uncle Greg's support during this ordeal. If not for him, I might have faced this situation alone. Reflecting on this experience, I am overwhelmed by the twists of fate and the importance of having a strong support system. I welcome your thoughts on this story. What would you have done in my position? Consider this twist. What if I didn't have Uncle Greg to fall back on? Share your opinions in the comments below. My name is Mr. Redito, and I share drama stories every day, ranging from inheritance disputes to cheating tales. If you enjoy these narratives, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow, reminding you that kindness is always in style. Peace.